Mr. Speaker, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. We're just hanging on for the wild ride. I saw your tweet the other day that resonated with so many when you said, just kind of as an experiment, you flipped on CNN and watched Don Lemon and his panel melt down over the president's Phoenix rally. It really, truly was a thing to behold, wasn't it?
It is. I'm going to write on it presently because I think if you just read what he said in his opening response, the minute the speech was over, he went crazy. And what's amazing is that then led the rest of the panel to be equally crazy.
But do you think that was an editorial decision, Newt? Do you think that somewhere in the bowels of CNN, a manager, a vice president, Zucker, whoever said, you know what? He came after us in this speech. We were forced to show a feed of the crowd turning on us. Let's go after him big time. It almost felt...
No, I don't think it requires a decision. I think the culture of CNN, like the culture of the New York Times and the Washington Post, has decided that they're at war with Donald Trump, and they don't have to get up every morning and make decisions. They get up every morning and they're at war.
They're just at war. We're going to go to battle every day.
What is it that he did today that was horrible? Because we need to cover something horrible, and if he didn't do anything that was horrible, what could we make up?
Right.
But I thought it was fascinating. I mean, Callista and I were sitting there, and I have mixed feelings about parts of that speech. I think Trump could do a lot better by being about 10% more presidential. But I looked at the end of the speech, and we just said out of curiosity to each other, I wonder if CNN's even covering it. So we switch over. Trump finishes, and they go immediately to Don Lemon, and he just goes berserk. I mean, it is the most one-sided. It's one thing to say we're now going to introduce the leader of the Democratic Party who will respond to President Trump.
Right.
It's another thing to have the host of the show say things that no Democrat would have been comfortable saying. I mean, he basically said, this guy is unhinged, he's deranged, he's crazy.
Dementia.
It's embarrassing.
Yep. A child, he's a 6-year-old child.
I'm thinking about going through and just pulling out every vicious phrase used on CNN that night in analyzing the speech for the first hour or two. And I think people would be startled. And, of course, what Trump has figured out is this is the level we're fighting at.
Right.
So you guys want to fight this way? Fine. I'm going to spend 20 minutes beating you up. My crowd's going to be with me, and my crowd's bigger than your crowd. And frankly, I think there was a poll out yesterday in Ron Fischet's Lunchtime Politics that about 49% of the country now thinks the media is deliberately hostile to Trump.
Oh yeah. Well, that's not a heavy lift. I saw a poll. I quoted a poll yesterday, an NPR Marist poll that shows that the single lowest poll number for any entity is trust in the media. It's 30% for the media. It's way lower than trust of President Trump. I mean, he's like at 37 or something in that poll. They're at 30. The only ones, I mean. By
the way, Mike, you'll find this interesting. Speaking of polling, my newsletter tomorrow at Gingrich Productions, which is available for free if people want to sign up for it. My newsletter tomorrow is on Macron, the president of France, and Donald Trump, because after all of the elite media oohing and awing and gushing about Macron, who's the great, young, moderate savior, his polling numbers are worse than Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're not talking about that very much, though.
That's right.
You won't they won't hear a lot of that on Don Lemon's show. The president this week in Phoenix hinted about a government shutdown. He wants to get this wall built. He's going to need the funding. Here was Speaker Paul Ryan's reaction to that suggestion.
I don't think a government shutdown is necessary, and I don't think most people want to see a government shutdown, ourselves included. I don't think anyone's interested in having a shutdown. I don't think it's in our interest to do so. While we work on doing what we actually said we would do, what we've done already in the House, and we need to do, which is to control our border. So I don't think you have to choose between the two.
I just read an article you wrote that said the elite news media loves it when Republicans attack Republicans. The left-wing reporters, editors, producers, TV personalities, and analysts all find it exciting to watch Republicans try to damage each other. Does what Paul Ryan said about the government shutdown qualify in that scenario, Newt, from what you suggested?
Well, no, I don't think he was taking the president head on. I think he was saying, listen, if you remember what you just ran of Speaker Ryan, if it happens the way he described it, is fine. He said we don't need to have one. We can get things done. The House has already passed it. What the president's done, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. What the president has done is put down a marker. He said, as President of the United States, I am not going to sign a bill that doesn't fund the wall.
Right.
Now, you can't make me. And you and the Congress have a decision to make. If you want to close the government, don't fund the wall. Mm-hmm. But I campaigned for 2 years on the wall. I'm going to build the wall. And, you guys, maybe if you can get a veto override majority in the House and Senate, go at it.
Right.
But they're not going to get a veto override majority, and they know it.
But I very much like your tone that when you hear a conservative activist or a Republican complaining about a Republican, including Donald Trump,
That's right.
Ask them how much that time they've spent that day complaining about the Democrats, who are the true opponents.
The president, I thought, moved a fair amount in Phoenix. He actually went after the Democrats more than I have seen him. But then he has to come back and he hits Senator Flake, which I think is totally counterproductive. Mm-hmm. Flake voted to repeal Obamacare. Yeah, now, Flake doesn't like Trump. Trump doesn't like Flake. So what? This is a big boy's business and big girl's business. And, you build a team and you find a way to make that team successful. And you don't have to love everybody in the team, but it's got to be a team. And I think the money that's going to be spent by conservative right-wing groups trying to beat people like Senator Flake is a crazy misuse of money. We have seats Democrats holding seats in Montana, North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri. I mean, these are seats that are ripe for us to go out there and pick off these Democrats, who none of whom, by the way, zero, voted for the repeal of Obamacare.
Yeah, but Newt, I got to push back because we have the majority now, and they're not playing ball, and there's not a sense of unity. They couldn't even get the votes for repealing and replacing. Why not purge the party of these Trump-hating Republicans and fight for Republicans who are willing to be unified and to try to advance the agenda and get done legislatively what needs to be done?
Well, I'd say two reasons. I mean, first of all, and I've written on this 3 times now, for every single Republican who voted no in the Senate on repealing Obamacare, there were 16 Democrats. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, and when people talk about unity, McConnell got 49 out of 52. Mm-hmm. That's pretty close to unity. Yeah. If we had won, there were 4 seats that we lost in 2010 and 2012, where we ran very weak candidates, and we should have won all 4. If we'd won those 4 seats, McConnell would have had a majority that was stable. If McConnell picks up 5 or 6 seats next year, he's going to have a stable majority. But you're asking this guy, when he has a 52-vote majority, you're saying to him, okay, you got to get 51 or 52 out of 52. Now, that's beyond being a team. That's a level of unity that's very hard to do, particularly on controversial issues. He came very close to doing it. And my only point is, every time the president says something bad about McConnell, he ought to say 9 things bad about Schumer.
Is this overblown, this so-called dust-up or feud between Trump and McConnell, in your view?
No, I don't think it's overblown. I think both of them are very angry. I think both of them feel very frustrated, and I think that they have just wildly different personalities. McConnell wrote a wonderful memoir called The Long Game, and I read it and I was very impressed with it. And you read it, you're looking at a guy who thinks about a very long-term view. Mm-hmm. Trump's a guy who thinks about a very intense, very existential short-term view. So their personalities are just startlingly different.
But resolvable?
Well, look, one of the great things about the Constitution is the Founding Fathers didn't care about us. The Founding Fathers cared about freedom. And they designed a system, and they said to all of the descendants, you had better learn how to make it work. So I am hoping that at some point that, McConnell and the president will sit down to breakfast or something and talk through, okay, not just how we're going to get through the next year, but if Trump wants to get reelected, you're talking about 7 more years of this stuff.
Right.
So how are we going to pick up enough Democratic seats next year? We have a shot at 6 to 8 seats next year. Now, that means you would have absolute working majority in the Senate on a regular basis. You'd get an amazing amount done. But if we spend all of our time shooting ourselves, and we never point out, for example, that that Senator Manchin of West Virginia, the biggest Trump state by percentage,
right?
But he didn't vote for it. So why aren't we a little concerned there? You go down the list. And my only point is, the people who are blocking the changes you and I want are called Democrats. They're not called Republicans. the handful of Republicans who are outliers who aren't doing the right thing are trivial compared to the total unanimity of a Democratic Party dedicated to resistance.
Incidentally, it's very important. You should absolutely get Newt's free newsletter, GingrichProductions.com. It's one of the must-reads for me, and I hope you get it as well, GingrichProductions.com. Final question. I have to leave this on a moment of levity. You've known the Clintons for many years. Mrs. Clinton has a new book coming out with one of the most horrific titles, one of the most regrettable titles I've ever heard in her situation, What Happened? And in What Happened, she apparently read from her own book about one of those fateful debates. Let's listen to her characterization of it.
Well, what would you do? Do you stay calm, keep smiling, and carry on as if he weren't repeatedly invading your space? Or do you turn, look him in the eye, and say loudly and clearly, "Back up, you creep. Get away from me. I know you love to intimidate women, but you can't intimidate me, so back up."
Newt, I'm not saying this to be mean-spirited. I mean this sincerely. I feel so sorry for her right now and not just kind of going away. She's back, though, with this book. What are your thoughts? Well,
my thoughts are she ought to talk to George W. Bush, who had Al Gore do the same thing to him in the debate in 2000, and all Bush did was calmly turn, stare directly at Gore, until Gore flinched and backed off. You know, I mean, you don't have to get in these kind of you creep routines. I mean, again, given some of Secretary Clinton's life, I understand why she identifies some men as creeps, but I think that's irrelevant. This is a tough league. You're gladiators. You're out there fighting. You got to go at full speed. You got to be prepared to fight. And the idea that you're going to whine about the fact that this guy got in your personal space, which is a technique, by the way, she used back in the Senate race back in 2000.
I remember that. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break. If that's a problem, I'm glad she's not trying to negotiate with Putin.
No kidding. It ain't beanbag, although I'm not sure Mr. Romney isn't, remembering those words faithfully. Newt Gingrich, always great to catch your voice, and all my best to Callista. I'll see you soon. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Newt Gingrich here on the Mike Gallagher Show.